Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. Thank you very much again for taking time out to spend some time with me. My name's Les Allen. I'm going to be taking you through Peachtree Business Intelligence Level 2, Session 1. So you should all feel very, very proud that you've made it this far. We're going to be taking it up a notch, talking about some slightly more technical type work. I'm going to run through the agenda shortly, but just a reminder, all of the microphones will be turned off. You'll only be able to hear my voice. If you do have any questions, please feel free to send them through. I can see them as they come through in real time. Anything in particular that's relevant at that point, I'll address. Otherwise, I'll hold the questions back to the end of the session. We should pretty much take up close to the full hour. There's a fair bit to cover actually in here, but it's all good stuff. And as usual, the video is being recorded. Now, I noticed this earlier today that last week's video, something has happened to last week's video. It wasn't available on the Peachtree website. So as soon as this session is completed, Mary's also said, yeah, she didn't see the link after the last session. So what I'm going to do is make sure that last week's session and today's session will be uploaded before I leave the office, and then I'll make sure that those links are sent out to you within the next 24 hours. All right. So, just a quick reminder of how to participate. Please, questions, you feel free to close the GoToWebinar interface as well by clicking on the orange arrow. And questions, please send them through. If you do have any particular questions at any time, please feel free to send them through. I see Frederick's already sent through a question. Frederick, I'll go through I'll have a take a look at your question at the end of the session because it's not related to anything at this particular point, but I will come back to you. And so we'll be submitting text questions. Again, session's recorded and it'll be made available for you inside of the next 24 hours. What are we going to be covering today? Oh, quick reminder of the web address that you need to go to, community.alchemax.com/group. Now, the Alchemax webinars area will have plenty of detail, but I believe you will have access. If you go to community.alchemax.com/group, that's where you'll find your Sage Peachtree Intelligence link. All right, Mary's sent through, I missed the first session, got the second, didn't realize we were supposed to do lab work. Well, you don't have to do the lab work, Mary. Mary's question, that she didn't realize there was lab work to do. Mary, you don't have to. It's very much like school. Well, more like college or university. It's entirely up to you if you choose to. However, there will be exams at the end, so I would suggest that you study. I really feel bad about sounding like a school teacher or a college professor. So my apologies, Mary. So yeah, you can work through those exercises. There's an exercise document that we send with the documentation for this particular session. Just work through them at your own pace, at your own time. It's entirely up to you how you choose to do that. So now, excellent work, Mary. Thank you. Now what are we going to be talking about? Now I can actually get onto the agenda. Sometimes I get ahead of myself, and I apologize. So we're going to take a look at the structure of a standard report. Now I say standard report because there are two different types of reports that we can create in Peachtree Business Intelligence. One is a standard report, the other is a union report, and we'll talk more about union reports, I believe, even in the next session. So we'll take a look at the structure of a standard report, exactly what goes into making a standing report. Mary, you're distracting me now. Can I have an A, please? If you can get me an apple to the Johannesburg office before the exam, absolutely, Mary, I'll definitely give you an A. I believe that was supposed to be a private comment, but I'll address it now. Thanks, Mary. And no problems at all for the interruption. Structure of a standard report. Then we'll talk about creating a brand new report from scratch. All right, so I'll take you through the process, but it's important to understand exactly what goes on as far as what makes up a standard report. That's fine. So we'll create a brand new report from scratch, and once we've created it, then we'll take a look at exactly what happens inside of the workbook itself. Once we've run our report out, then I'm going to give you a basic demonstration on creating a pivot table which is one of the standard features in Excel, 2003, 2007, and in 2010. So what I'm going to show you, you will be able to replicate 2003 users. It's going to be a slightly different process to do it, but you will be able to do everything that I'm doing. So we'll create a new report layout using an existing container. If you're not sure what a container is, that's okay, stick around. You'll know exactly what one is in about 10 minutes' time. Then we'll take a look at the financial workbook. We'll take a look at the financial workbook structure and show you how that financial workbook works so that you know how to start customizing it. And that's going to be a big thing for your customers. The financial reports that we generate, there's no way that every customer will want to see their financials in exactly that way. So knowing how to customize those particular reports is a very, very good thing to know so that you'll be able to help your customers, even yourselves, be able to do it. So we'll take a look at how the financial workbook report is set up and how we can start customizing it. All right. First thing we're going to talk about, though, is the structure of a standard report. All right, the structure of a standard report. First, there was the Peachtree database, and it was good. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at the connector module. Now, we're going to go more into the connector module in later levels of this particular course. But what the connector module allows you to do, it performs two roles. The first role is to establish a connection to a database. Okay, so Peachtree database is there. Which Peachtree database would I like to connect to? Maybe I want to connect to my HR system, or maybe I want to connect to Sage CRM. It's entirely up to me. The connection's there. So I'm going to say I would like any report that runs to run from this particular database. Now, the second point is the container. For those of you who might be familiar with Crystal reports, think of a container as a join. It's a little bit more in-depth than that, but that's the basics of what a container is. A container will define what data you have access to. So if we think about a sales container, it will give me access to sales information, but it won't necessarily give me access to general ledger transaction information because those tables are not part of my sales tables, my sales containers. Alternatively, if I've got a financial container which is responsible for bringing through financial information, it may have some information relating to sales, but it won't have access to all of my customer names or anything along those lines because they'll be in a separate table. So a container is set up to give you access to certain information. Here's the golden rule. If you were in classroom training with me, you'd actually get sick of me repeating this. The golden rule is every standard report uses a container. It has to. The standard report needs to know what information it's going to be playing with. It's that simple. What information would you like to play with? The container is responsible for giving the report access to certain areas of the database. So that's what the report is going to be able to play with. All right. Golden rule, every standard report uses a container. Now, I specified earlier that there are two types of reports that we can run. We can run a standard report, or we can create a union report. Union report is multiple standard reports altogether. So a union report never uses a container because the standard reports do. So the union report doesn't need to. Union report will simply combine multiple standard reports together. So a container defines what data you have made available that this report can use. Now, think about this. We've given you a number of reports in the report manager. So as standard, we give you a few reports to get you started. The golden rule is that every standard report must have a container because it needs to know what to pull, and a union report is multiple standard reports altogether. What this means is, in order for Frederick's statement, that implies that a union report has several containers. It does imply it, but it's not actually always correct. Frederick, let me explain. I can use the same container multiple times to create different reports. So I might want to create a sales container. Then I'll have one report that looks at last year's sales information, and it's just a report that deals with everything before 1st of January 2011. Then I have a second report which uses the same container, but this time that report's going to have a filter on it that says, give me everything from 1st of Jan onwards. I can combine those two reports into one union, into separate sheets. But in effect, the union report, if you want to use the analogy of the union report uses a container, it's still only using the one container. It's just being used multiple times. That's why we say the union report doesn't use containers. The union report combines standard reports together, and each of those uses a container. But they may even use the same container. All right. So now, with my report manager, I've got a number of reports to start with, which means that you have a number of containers that you can start playing with straight away. They are there and they exist. If you don't have access to the connector module, it doesn't mean they're not there, and it doesn't mean they don't work. They do work. It just means you don't have access to them. So this is where coming into point 2 about creating a new workbook, that's going to tie that together. We've got existing reports and they do use containers, but it's not stopping us using those containers for our own work. The Report Manager module lets you create a report. You pick a container. That's the container I would like to use. You then apply fields, filters, parameters, and I'll talk about those during the course of the presentation. So this is structuring the information that we'd like to bring through. That's fine. Once we've structured that information, we bring it into the Excel workbook. And I've already demonstrated too how easy it is to relink an Excel file to a report so it saves it as a template. So the structure of a standard report, there are 3 components. The first component is the container, because the container needs to exist to say what information the report can play with. Second point is the report itself. The third is the Excel template, the thing that's going to make it look pretty. So a report is made up of, a standard report is made up of all 3 of those components. You don't have to have a template either. You can simply run a report and it just does a raw data dump into Excel, and you can do whatever you like with it from that point. But normally people have a template attached to make the data look good. So that's the standard report structure. We've sent through the slides as well in your document pack. If you haven't received them yet, you will be receiving it. I only got a couple of non-deliveries and they've been addressed. So you will be receiving these slides, so you can refer to these slides at a later point. 3 parts to a report: the container, the report itself, and the resulting Excel template. Now, let me switch across into my report manager. And we're going to take a look at creating a new report from scratch. All right. So you can see these are the reports that we give. We give a couple of financial reports: purchases, sales, and a dashboard report. Now I'd like to create my own report from scratch. Creating that, actually the steps to create it are very, very simple. I'm going to start with a sales report. So I'm going to right-click on the sales folder and go down to Add Report. Very simple. Now, adding a report is pretty much a 4-step process. The first step is, what type of report would I like to use? And we're going to talk about union reports in a later session. I believe it's going to be in the next session. But for now, we're just wanting a standard report. A standard report can only use one container at a time. A report is linked to a single container. If you want information from multiple containers, then you have to go down the path of creating multiple reports, each one looking separately at a container, and then creating a union report around them, wrapping them all together. So I'm going to select Standard Report. The name for my report, I'm going to call this Dashboard Sales. Not very inventive, but gets the job done. Dashboard Sales. Now, here's my big option. I now have a list of containers. So this is step 3. So the first one was, what type of report would I like? Second option is to give it a name. Third is, what container would I like to play with? Now, the containers that we give you there's a container there that you won't actually have access to. I did it as part of a demonstration. Financial reports, all container. That gives me trial balance details. The sales analysis, it gives me my quantity, average unit cost, amount and gross profit of each item. So when you create containers, and we'll talk about that in later sessions, it's a more advanced option, you should actually be able, you should give a description of the container you create so that somebody who comes in here knows exactly what's going on. Mary sent through, can we do this with inventory also? Well, I would imagine that would be data from your purchasing table. So your purchases, that's looking at your stock. So absolutely. Every step that I'm doing right now, you can do with your package right now. And this is a very important thing as far as customers go. And they need to understand this, that just because we give you this information just because we give you these reports doesn't mean that you can't make your own reports. What it does mean is that you can make reports based around, sorry, just getting my screens back up. You can make reports around any of the information that we give you access to. Remember, the container is responsible for saying which tables and which fields you might want to have, you might want to play with. The containers exist. Any customer can come in, right-click here, add a report, select a container, and bring everything through. So they can start making their own reports if they so wish. It's entirely up to them. You're going to have some customers that will say, nope, not interested. If I need anything, I'll talk to you and you'll organize it for me. There will be others who will want to play. There'll be others who will genuinely want to go in and start creating their own reports on their own. And we've got the training materials. They'll be going through a process very much like you're going through now. So any customer with the purchase of the report manager, they don't need, and I'm going to be very forceful here, they do not need the connector module to create their own reports. You only ever create reports in here. You only ever create reports in the report manager module. So if you ever hear of somebody saying, why would I need the connector module? And somebody says, you need it to write reports. That is incorrect. However, there is a limitation here in that the only containers that exist right now for you are your financial reports containers, general ledger transactions, purchases, and sales analysis. So Tammy sent through, Scott, I have seen your question. I'll come to it just now. Tammy sent through, aren't we limited with the information you have in the existing report container? For example, we can't write reports currently for either job cost or payroll. Correct. You can't with the report manager module. But Tammy, if you buy the connector module, you can go and make your own containers. And that's a more advanced level, but we'll get there. All right. So purchasing of the connector module will then give you access. So let me clarify something for you. Tammy asked the question, so I'm going to use Tammy's example. Customer Joe Citizen comes to Tammy and says, I need a job costing report, but I don't have the connector module. What can you do? Tammy has access to the connector module. She can create the job cost container that's needed. She comes into the report manager, adds a report using the job cost container that she's just created. Now we're going to talk about importing and exporting in a later session. So what Tammy can do though is she can create the report at her premises and then she chooses to export the report. Now, what are the three components? And I'm just going to ask you to think through them in your own mind. What are the three components of a report? They are, I've given you a couple of seconds. They are, I feel like I'm presenting via Sesame Street. So kids at home, think about this. You've got the container. You've got the report. Then you've got the Excel template. Without any one of those, Carla, nice. Carla's just sent through a statement that she'd like to be Elmo. So if anybody else wants to be Elmo, I'm sorry. Carla's already picked it. I'm willing to be the count, though. I like the count. Oh, okay. Stop that. Focus now. So all three of those parts work for the same report. Okay. So if Tammy sends just the report but doesn't send the container, Joe Citizen's report won't work because they don't have the container. So when you export and import a report, all of the components that make that report work go with. So the customer, and I'd really like, as far as dealers are concerned, I'd really like you to be very clear on this from the start. Not all customers need the connector. We'll talk more about the connector later and the reasons why you need it. But if you can write the report and you can send it to the customer, they can import it and the report will work for them. So they don't need it. And remember, the connector, the customer's going to need to have a knowledge of table structures, fields, etc., etc. The customer may not want to do that. That's not their job. That's your job. I don't have time to go and learn about this SQL thing and whatever it happens to be. You do it. Just give me a report that works. Now, one last digression, and then we'll move on with creating of the report. Mary, I saw your question about how much the cost of the connector is. I'm just going to check with Carla if she's got the confirmed details. I'm not sure if the pricing has been confirmed, so I'm just going to ask Carla if she can give me some feedback there. Now, Tammy has created, and I'm picking on you now, Tammy. Tammy's created this job costing report for one customer. And I reckon that at least 10 more customers. Sorry, Carla, have you got the confirmed pricing for the report manager and the connector modules? Has it been ratified and set in stone? Okay. Oh, Tammy said the pricing for the connector module for Peachtree was given in the Peachtree 2012 presentation on that, but Carla's going to come back. Carla's going to try and check and come back on those numbers. But thanks for the feedback, Tammy. So now Tammy's got a cost code report that at least 10 of her other customers would want. So she's written the report once, given it to this customer, and sold it for maybe 150, 200 bucks, whatever the pricing was. Now, as far as pricing is concerned, think about how much time it's going to save the customer. Not necessarily the work that you put into it, but think about the value that you're providing to the customer. That's the gauge that you should be looking at as far as your pricing is concerned. But Tammy can now turn around, take that one report, emailing it to a bunch of other customers saying, hey, wouldn't you like something like this? And now all of a sudden, Tammy's got a report that she can resell. She's also sent through, thanks, Tammy. Connector module is $100. All right, thanks very much for that information. So please understand that not every customer needs it because you can do a lot of the work that they need. All right, so that's it for now as far as exporting reports and connector issues are concerned. Let's continue on with this. I'm going to select my sales analysis report. I click OK. And here's something that you guys can do right now. Open up your report manager. Well, after. Pay attention to me, but so do it later. Open up your report manager, add a report, and select one of those containers. Then do the next step that I'm about to do, which is pick which fields I'd like to see. So this list that you see on the screen right now, that's all of the information that container is making available for me. Select all. So I want everything. And click OK. You've just created a report. It's a basic one, and it's a straight raw data dump. Everything in that container is going to, everything I can access via that container is going to come through and land in Excel. So if you're not sure what information you have access to, just do exactly what I did. It takes you 10 seconds to add a report. Now, you've selected all of the fields. All we need to do is click the Run button. The information will now land directly into Excel, and you can see what information this container gives to you. When it comes to financial information, think about the report that we give you, that you can run that report and you can see a stack of financial information. The container needs to be able to give us access to that, otherwise we can't make that report. So please think about, if you're not sure what the containers give you access to, you can just simply add a report, pick a container, select all the fields, run it, and you can now scroll through all of these columns, seeing the information you're going to have access to. Plus, you'll have access to the Peachtree data dictionaries as far as PBI is concerned. So the PBI data dictionaries list each of the containers and the fields that are in those containers, Plus it then tells you that field comes from this particular field in this particular table. So you'll have access to that information, so you can start telling customers, oh, can I make a job costing report? Well, we don't have that information available. Mary, can you teach classes to our customers? Mary, I'm going to ask Carla to field that question because I'm not sure about training processes, certifications for trainers, etc. Mary, I might get Carla to have a chat to you at the end of this session via email. So I'll come back to you on that point. So now I've got my report. It's just a raw data dump. It's not pretty, but it's everything that that container gives me access to. I'm going to take a look now at the structure of the report, and I'm going to come back to my report manager and show how we can start limiting information that's available here. First point, the first worksheet, and I'm going to be very specific, I'm not going to call it sheet 1. When you run a report out, a standard report, the first sheet in the workbook will receive your raw data. Always. All of the information will land on the first sheet, and the reason I'm not calling it sheet 1, and I ask you, please don't get into the habit of calling it sheet 1, is because I can rename that sheet anything I like. I could call it raw data, and when I create and link my template back, the first sheet will always be called raw data. So it's not sheet 1. It's kind of being pedantic and fastidious, but you need to in this regard because it does have an effect on what we're about to do. The first sheet of the workbook will receive raw data. The second sheet of the workbook, generally, 9 times out of 10, well 99 times out of 100, will carry the parameters of this report. So when the report was run, if we apply parameters which say, please only give me this particular information according to these dates, etc., all of the parameters that you provide will be listed on this sheet. I'm going to swing back to Report Manager. When your screen updates, I'd like you to look over on the right-hand side of the report. I've got my dashboard sales report selected. Have a look at the bottom there. Parameters on second sheet. There's a tick there. Parameters on the second sheet of the workbook. And it's a good thing to keep them. Sure, you can untick that, which means you have another worksheet to play with. But you can have effectively unlimited worksheets anyway in your workbook. Plus, it's also useful. Not only for creating decent headings that are dynamic, but think about a customer who runs a report for the boss. The boss then comes back to them and says, this information is incorrect. I know it's wrong. The user can then look at the parameter sheet and tell the boss, you're looking at a report that's 3 weeks old. Have a look at the date this report was run on. Plus, by being able to check the parameters that are being used, you can say, well, you didn't select it for that particular sales rep. That's why the information is wrong. So it's a good thing to leave that tick there because you can use the information on your second sheet for a couple of good purposes. Once you get past the first and second sheets, A for away. You can do whatever you like on those other sheets. Okay? Frederick, the developers should consider having the program automatically label the first 2 tabs. It doesn't really help because if they're automatically labeled something but the user would like to change it, then they can simply change it. Us putting down raw data or parameters, we try to leave that flexibility entirely up to the user. It's a good idea, but we'd rather, if you want to do those things, then absolutely. It only takes you a couple of seconds to rename the sheet the way you would like to see it and create and link back. Plus, there's an option, it's one of the advanced options, that you can hide the raw data sheets so that when I create a very nice looking sheet, a very nice looking pivot table or something like that, I don't want my user looking at the raw data. It's just going to confuse them. So we can actually hide that data away. So there's a couple of reasons why we don't. We generally try to leave as much flexibility to the customer as possible. But very good suggestion. Thank you very much for that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about pivot table. I'm going to create a pivot table quickly. Now, And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the pivot table creation because we've done Excel presentations on pivot tables, and you can download those videos via the Alchemex Webinars website on the BI community. So you can check out those videos and check exactly what pivot tables have got on offer. Right? So I'm going to do a very basic one, but there's one thing I want to point, there are two things I want to point out about this process. Selected a cell in the workbook. I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and remember, if your screens are updating slowly, you can review the video to see exactly what I'm clicking. If I click on Pivot Table, it will select all of the raw data. Now, I'm going to unhighlight the data here. Highlighting that table range, so you can actually see that right now my pivot table is looking at cell A1 down to cell CW955. So that's column CW. So we're looking at 24, 26, 52. We're looking at around about 80 columns of information, over 80 columns of information that have come through just because I've selected all of the data here. My problem is that row count. The row count says 955. What happens if next time I run this report there are 1,000 rows or 2,000 rows? The pivot table will not update automatically. It will not update based on new information that comes through. So we help you get around this in a certain way. When you create pivot table, your table range is automatically highlighted. If you press the F3 button, F3 brings up your named ranges box. Now, named ranges, standard function inside of Excel that you can select a group of cells and give that group of cells a name so it can be used in formulas. We name all of the raw data that comes through raw data. We actually call it raw data. You'll see that I've highlighted it on the screen right now. So I pressed F3 to bring up my paste name box. There's raw data there. If I select it and click OK, you'll see that my table range now looks at sheet 1, because that's the name of the sheet, raw data. The next time I run the report and there are 20,000 rows, that entire grouping of 20,000 rows gets called raw data. By doing this, your pivot tables will always be refreshed. They'll always carry through all of the information. Okay. Now, last point, choose where you want the pivot table to be placed. If you leave it on New Worksheet, I'm going to click OK now. I want you to see where that sheet is inserted. Jennifer sent through, do we need to be concerned with the sheet exclamation mark designation? Yes, you do, because you can have a named range. I can have the raw data named range on sheet 1, on sheet 3. Individual sheets can have the same named range. That's why knowing which sheet you're looking at will help Excel determine that's the data I want to look at. All right. So there's sheet 1, exclamation mark, raw data, and I'm going to put it onto a new worksheet. When I click OK, I have an issue. Well, I will have an issue when I try to link this report back. Okay. Trying to link this particular report back, what happens to the very first worksheet in a workbook? When you insert a sheet in Excel, it automatically inserts in the position to the left of where you currently are. So now the first sheet of my workbook is sheet 4. If I create and link my report, the next time I run it out, sheet 4, anything I do right now is going to get destroyed because it's going to get overwritten with information the next time it runs out. Now, this means I have to move my first sheet past sheet 1 and past sheet 2. The reason being, sheet 1 is my first worksheet. That's where raw data is going to go. The second sheet has parameters on it. So I can move it in front of the second sheet and sheet 3. I'm fine with that. It doesn't really care about the naming order. I can rename the sheet dashboard if I want to. It's entirely up to me, as long as it's not in the first 2 positions. So it's an important thing to understand. If you do go through, I make the mistake similarly all the time. Whenever I'm creating a report for somebody, I'll forget, I'll create and link the pivot table, and done. Okay. Frederick sent through, if you had inserted the table first and then the insert of the pivot table, if you get a similar effect in the table, yeah, you would. Yep, very good point, Frederick. So what am I going to look here? I'm just going to throw down a pivot table very quickly. As I said, you can review the video to see everything that I do. Okay, customer account number. Oh, let's not do that. Let's talk about the customer ID, customer name. There we go. That's a good one. And we'll do line cost amount. We'll make it a sum. There's my line cost amount. That's fine. And quantity received. That'll do. All right. It's just a basic pivot table. Mary sent through. Yes, Mary sent through the question. You have to. Do you have to move it, or is there a way of automatically doing it? If I do the insert of a pivot table, I can say, please insert it on a new sheet, or I can say, please use an existing sheet. Now, by default, a new workbook gets 3 sheets. You can say, please put it onto an existing sheet and select sheet 3, and then there's no issues, but there's no automatic way to tell that sheet to move. It's a standard Excel function, and it's something that Excel does regardless of whether we like it or not. When you insert a brand new sheet, even if you used the new sheet tab, the keyboard shortcut, Shift F11, it would insert at this point. All right, so no, Mary, unfortunately, there's no automatic way to get that done. Here's my report. It's very basic, just using it for concept. And when you review your exercise documents, you'll have an exercise here where you can start creating your own pivot table. I'm going to move back to my report manager, and I'm going to go through the create and link process. Right-click on my report. Let screens update now. Right-click, select create and link. Now, I've done this process previously. I've given you demonstrations of what you can do as far as your sales analysis report. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. Plus, it's also covered in your documents because we've got a lot more information to come through. But I'm going to pause right here because this can be important. Excel 2003, the number of rows in Excel 2003, 65,536 rows. Excel 2007 and 2010 have over 1 million. You'll only get this message if you have 2007 or 2010 installed on your machine. We give you the option, what version of Excel would you like to use? Okay, so you can select the version, because if you create a 2007 template, but your end user only has 2003, there might be some issues with the report, not the least of which would be losing basically 990,000 rows. Selecting my Excel 2007 template, name it, and you'll be able to review the video to see exactly what happened there. Okay. All right. Wrong button. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, I need to talk about briefly the tabs that are available. Okay, now that we've added our report and it's bringing through all this information, now we need to start defining the properties of the report. So I'm going to briefly touch on the tabs across the top of the report. The first tab is the Columns tab. Okay, the Columns tab tells you what information is going to be landing on this sheet. When I first selected all of my fields to bring through from my report, now upon review, having a look at my raw data, I know there's a lot of information I don't need here. Maybe I don't need to see the customer's custom fields. Maybe I don't need to see the first name, surname, middle initial, etc. I can remove any of the fields here. Plus, you can also change the position with which this data is going to land on the sheet. So if I want to see date of the transaction first, I can drag a particular field and drop it to another location. When your screen updates, you'll see I've highlighted customer ship to zip. Now simply drag the field up and I'm hovering it over customer contact middle initial. If I drop it there, done. It's repositioned itself, and that's the way information is going to land on the sheet. If you want to remove anything, you can select something, click the remove button over on the right hand side, or simply press delete on your keyboard. It's entirely up to you. Parameters. Oh, I forgot. Scott had a question. Right, Scott. Scott's question was, do the folder ID numbers mean anything? Yes. And you can actually extrapolate this information across the reports as well. And when we move to the connector, to containers and connection levels as well. Inside, when we talk about importing reports, etc., I can bring in a report that has exactly the same name as a report I already have. So I might have customized the dashboard analysis report. I send it to the customer. They've still got their existing dashboard analysis. When I bring this one in, I'm going to have two dashboard analysis. Now, rather than confusing things by saying, well, you can't have that, you must rename one now, we give a unique ID number to each report and to each folder. So if I select dashboard sales now and I have a look at my properties, when your screens update, you'll be able to see it. The report ID number is ID 27 for this report. If I add another report, that'll be ID number 28. We use the ID numbers to track folders and reports in the back end of the system, so that way we don't have any real problems as far as multiple reports with multiple names. So, Steve, every folder has an ID number. I can have 27 folders called sales, but each of them would have a different ID number. We find it's much simpler rather than causing complications with if you try to create another report, stopping people, especially with naming of reports. All right. So I apologize for the delay in getting back to you on your question. All right, Dave sent through, receive the labs for level 1. Please let me know where I can get labs for level 2. Dave, your email should be coming through shortly because I send the email pack out roughly half an hour before the start of the session. Make sure I get everybody who's registered for the session. So Dave, you should be receiving the email shortly. All right. Let's talk about filters and parameters. If I run my financial report, let me do that now. Gives you an example. So I've selected my financial report all. When your screen updates, you'll see in the top right-hand corner, I have some options as far as particular values are concerned. Which budget do I want to look at? Which particular fiscal year do I want to start looking at, etc. If you take a look in the name bar there, it says Enter Report Parameters. Parameters and filters are the ways that you start restricting the information that comes into your report. So let's take a look at a parameter for my dashboard sales. So for my dashboard sales, I'd like to add a parameter. When I add a parameter, I then get given a list of Dave, great, thank you. I saw your comment about receiving the files. Thank you very much. So now I've got a list of all of my fields, and I can select which ones I would like to filter on. I'm going to select just customer name. Now, the next screen, I'm going to choose that I want to filter on customer name. The next screen is my comparison methods. Some of these should be very simple for you. Okay, equal to, greater than, less than. So those are pretty standard. Some of them you'll be familiar with. Oh, I can do, give me any dates greater than or equal to 1st of January, less than or equal to 1st of January. You can apply multiple parameters. Okay, Mary sent through, so with PBI we will now have more access to payroll and job cost. Absolutely. Mary, with access to the connector module, you hit every single field, not only in Peachtree, but in any ODBC database that you want to connect to. So you can start consolidating information across multiple systems. Absolutely. So your comparison methods here, you can put down multiple fields. So give me a greater than or equal to start of the month, less than or equal to the end of the month. So it gives you a date range. So you can do that for values, you can do it for account numbers, you can do it for any of the information. I'm going to show you, so a lot of these are pretty basic and you'll understand, but I want to highlight a particularly useful one, which is the is-in comparison. Say I want to select 3 customers for my report. One starts with the letter A, one starts with a K, and one starts with an S. So those 3 particular customers, I can't do a range. I can't do greater than or equal to A, less than or equal to S, because I'm going to get everything in there. When I select is in, I'm going to click OK. I then get asked for a default value. Now, you saw when I ran the financial report, I had the option of no budget. It was already there in the field. This is where I can put it. I'm going to leave that blank for now. I'm going to click OK. So you'll see that I now have a parameter here. When I click to run the report, you'll see that I now have a pop-up box. And remember, you can stack multiple ones of these. So I can do greater than or less than this date, or greater than or equal to this date, less than or equal to that date, and for this particular customer, and this particular sales rep, or this particular account, either way. But when I click the Browse button over in the top right-hand corner, the ellipsis, 3 dots, I have tick boxes. So I can select specific customers. I want that one, and I want that one, and I want that one, and I want that one. By setting it up as a parameter, I give the user the capability of changing who I want to run this for at any given time. So I could do an is-in on customer name and an is-in on sales rep, or an is-in on zip code, or geographical area, or state. It's entirely up to you. But we give you the ability to start filtering on any of this information, and using the comparison methods is very, very powerful. Some of them begins with 100. That'll give you all accounts that start with 100, or maybe ends with. If people are looking at just one tier of segmentation, so it's a main account and a sub-account, show me all accounts that end with 101 to try and get particular departments, etc. So that's a parameter. Now I want to demonstrate a filter. Okay, parameters and filters do the same thing, as in they restrict the information that's coming through. However, parameters, you give the user the option, or even yourself, to change the value that you want to filter on at runtime. If I select to add a filter, it's exactly the same process as a parameter, but it won't give me the option to change this value, so I actually need to set this up. So let me have a look at date. Date's a very easy one to do. Okay, I'm going to say date, click OK, give me everything greater than or equal to. I'm going to click OK. Now when I click the Browse button here, because I have to, when it comes to filters, you have to set the value now, and you'll see why in just a moment. Everything from today. So every transaction greater than or equal to today, because I know the bellwether data runs a bit forward, I click OK. So now I have a filter. When I select to run the filter, to run the report, sorry, when your screen updates, you'll see that I don't have the option to change the filter value. It's set. Parameters I do. So think about this. If you wanted to run a report that just showed invoices, ignored sales orders, you could set up a filter that said, filter all document types equaling invoice. Done. Always run for this particular sales rep. Always run for this particular date range. Always run for this particular account set. Filters do not change the value. Parameters do. Mary said, or if we don't want anybody changing the report design, Mary, we'll talk about it in the advanced options for the report, that you can actually lock this down so people don't even get to see the filter options. If you set parameter up, yes, they can change those values, but they won't ever be able to change filters if you lock the report. All right. So filters and parameters. Filters are set. Parameters, you can change the value at runtime. Now, the last tab I'm going to look at for now is sort fields. Sort. You guys have sorted a table in Excel before. Please sort alphabetically. I can pick any of the fields that I would like that come into the report and sort them alphabetically. So generally, a lot of people like to have date as the first column that they see, then maybe the customer name, then the transaction ID, then values, etc. They like to have their raw data in an easy-to-read format. And I don't begrudge that at all. I do exactly the same thing. But please sort ascending, descending, etc. So I can move down to date. I select date, and then I can have multiple tiers as well. Frederickson through, can you set up a filter and or parameter to be beginning of current month, current year that updates by itself each month? Frederick, yes, you can. And it's something we're going to be talking about in one of the later sessions. I know some of you like to jump in a little bit more. The function that you would be looking at is called a system variable. System variables, if I give you the code at, month start at, it will dynamically change to give you the first date of the month you're currently in. But that's all I'm going to touch on about those now, because I don't want to get too far ahead. But if you do want to do your own research, you need to be looking for system variables. Okay, and you'll be able to find them in the help file. But yes, Frederick, we can do that. So here's my sort field on date. I click OK. And you see over on the right-hand side, you have the option to change it from ascending to descending. You can add multiple sort options. So please sort by date, then sort by customer name, then sort by product name, or by sales rep, etc. And you can have each of their own fields sorting, ascending or descending. Right. So that's an overview of how you start setting up your reports. Remember, you can download this video and review it as many times as you like until my voice gets boring, and redo the work, especially the work that's in the labs, to start becoming more familiar with, okay, how do I apply these things down? How do I set up my parameters? How do I set up my filters? All right. What I need to talk about now, final point, is the financial workbook structure. Now, I've shown you a standard report. Standard report has raw data on the first sheet, parameters on the second, and, well, anything you like from the third sheet onwards. And you can have multiple sheets, that's fine. You'll notice that financial reports, let me select that one. I do apologize, I run a lot of these sessions, so I'm not sure if I have covered this. You'll see that some of the icons are green, some of the icons are blue for reports. A blue icon is a standard report. I am hitting one container. I'm bringing that information into my first sheet. Done. A green report is a union report. So just looking at a report's color, you'll be able to know, oh, that's multiple reports running together. So my financial reports all report is actually multiple reports all running at the same time. Now, to save time, I've already run a financial report out, and I want to show you exactly how this particular report is structured. Yes, Mary, a union report is made up of standard reports. Absolutely. A union report, and you can't union unions, there would be no point. This union report over there has those 3 reports. That union has over there 2 reports. Please union that union and that union. No, you just create one union that adds all 5. So you don't union unions, you just create one union with all of the sub-reports that you need inside of it. Harking back to the workbook structure, raw data lands on the first sheet of the workbook. So you'll see that some worksheets here are actually hidden. So I'm going to unhide, and you'll actually see that the financial report has a lot of information backed up. But the main thing I want to talk about is the first sheet and then this lookup sheet. You can see the lookup sheet in the very bottom left-hand corner. It's the first sheet of the workbook. Let me unhide the first sheet and scroll across a bit so you can start seeing the information that's brought through. So this is by account, GL category descriptions, etc., 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 all of the totals per period. I'll move across so you can actually start seeing that. There we go. You'll be able to see some of that information there. So beginning balances, current year actual period 1, current year actual period 2, etc., etc. When you run a report from the menu sheet, Okay, so I moved across to the menu sheet. You'll see the buttons that are there: income statement, balance sheet, income statement, income statement. I can click any of those and run those reports out. I've already done it for income statement. I anticipated that I might have spoken a lot, and I'm running short of time, which is the case. So now, let's take a look at some of the raw data here. I've just zoomed in, to my income statement, and I've selected 39,355, that's sales for aviary. Now, have a look at the formula bar. The formula bar shows you that this isn't a number in a cell, it's a cell reference. All of the numbers here reference the lookup sheet. So let's go and take a look at the lookup sheet and see what it does. All of the numbers. If I move down to sales for equipment, you can see that it's now looking at cell N73 on the lookup sheet. All of the numbers here do. Let me go and take a look at the lookup sheet. Okay. The lookup sheet is the engine of this report, and you shouldn't play with it. All of the accounts will be listed, but then if I scroll across a little bit, you'll see that, there we go, and let me zoom in. Okay. I'm going to pause at that point, let screens update, and I'm going to explain exactly what happens on this sheet. The lookup sheet reorganizes all of the data from my first sheet, plus my data lookup sheet, plus all of the other sheets that are hiding in the background here, and it puts it into a matrix, effectively. Puts it into one massive table. So you see all my account numbers down the left-hand side. The columns that I've highlighted actually form a repetitive pattern. Actual, budget, prior. NOP. Columns NOP are actual budget prior for period 1. QRS, actual budget prior for period 2. TUV, actual budget prior for period 3. So on and so forth across this sheet. This is the sheet that does all of the grunt work. If I select, say, cell N12, if you really want to learn some Excel, take a look at that. The formula in the formula bar shows you that all of the numbers on this sheet are actually re-referencing from everywhere else in the workbook. And this is the key to customizing your own financial packs. You don't need to worry about what's happening here. The numbers will always update. Because remember, that formula means they're looking at other sheets. They're looking at raw data. That raw data will update. The structures of your report will always stay. So if I move to my income statement now, and I decide that I want to kill 10 of those accounts, so I'll let your screens update now. If I want to delete those, I can. That's fine. So I can create this sheet, customize it, delete anything that I don't want to see. That's great. I can delete columns as long as I maintain the cell references. As long as I maintain the cell references from my lookup sheet, I can do anything I like here. Because the cell references will maintain, but the numbers will update. There is nothing stopping me doing this. I go to the menu sheet and I rerun that income statement. Okay, and I'm going to recommend, just for time, that you check the video to see exactly what I'm going to do. So now I'm going to have two sheets that do exactly the same thing. They show exactly the same information. But on one sheet, I can delete all of the accounts I don't need to see. On another sheet, I can delete accounts that I don't need to see from there. So in this report, I can delete the first 5, adjust my columns, do my color schemes, etc., 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 whatever I want to do, and I just run those menus out each and every time, knowing that these accounts will always reference back to the lookup sheet. That means your numbers will always stay the same. The only thing you need to remember, once you've done all of this, create and link your template. So you want to save this Excel workbook back to your report. So this will be the template that runs each and every time. Warning, once you do this, once you create multiple sheets, okay, that menu button doesn't work for you anymore. You've customized a sheet. It's now up to you to maintain. Now, we showed you before that you do have the Add Accounts option, but it's very easy to insert a line, type in the account number you want, and then simply go and find where it is on the lookup sheet, Find the column and simply reference to that particular cell. So you can maintain your own, but it does mean that very easily, just use our layouts. We're happy for you to take the layouts, destroy them, cut them apart, make them better. We can rebuild them stronger, better, faster. If you get $6 million for a financial report customization, then I want 10%. But it's that easy. The engine of the financial workbook is the lookup sheet. If you don't change that, if you just remember, oh, all of the accounts are there and it's actual budget prior, actual budget prior, actual budget prior for each of the months, all you need to know is where to cell reference, and you can customize your own layouts. Use our menu, take those reports, do what you like with them. Key point, make sure you create and link template when you're done. Wow, and I cut that really, really fine. 10 o'clock my side, so I think it's 1 o'clock your side. Well, wherever you happen to be. My apologies. Okay, that's the correct link. That's the one you need to look at. Frederick's question, with sheet 1 and lookup present all the time the financial reports will be large? Frederick, not sure on that one. Frederick, with sheet 1 and lookup sheet present. Okay, I think I'll try and address the question. I'm certainly not quite getting it. Let's see if I can do it. The first sheet, your lookup sheet, all of the sheets that are hidden, those information will always represent the information directly out of your system. So if you've got 1,000 accounts, that's what's going to come through. And your lookup sheet will always reference everything behind it, all of that raw data. So it will always be up to date. If that doesn't answer your question, Frederick, please let me know. Or you can even send me an email. I'm happy to answer that. Mary said, if we do the lab work, do we send it to you or just practice it for us? Mary, I don't need to see it. It's more for your benefit. It's to help you get better skilled, because at the end, as I said, there will be an exam. So yeah, it's more for your benefit. But if you do have any particular questions, you're free to ask. A Excel worksheet will get to be multi-meg. Frederick, well, it will over time, in that each worksheet can get larger and larger, absolutely. But remember, when you create and link template, the raw data is deleted and it's refreshed each and every time. Okay, so it fully depends on how big the company's accounts are going to get. But the company accounts will actually, because we're really only talking about the company accounts themselves. Company accounts won't get terribly, I'm sure they could get big, but I don't think they're going to get terribly massive. But you're only ever going to have up to the number of accounts that the company has. So the data is not going to be extraneous, etc. How much data can you have in a report, Mary? Well, you can have, depends. Oh, these are Excel 2003 templates. So you're looking at 65,000 lines. If somebody's got more than 65,000 accounts, we need to look at other options. But then you can look at the Report Designer, which is a 2007 template, and then you're looking at 1 million rows. Free, I see your question about my email address. I'm the one who sent you through your documents today, so you should just be able to reply to that. But it's les@alchemex.com, les@alchemex.com. Okay, so Mary, you've got some clients with lots of data. What I would recommend before you go and talk to them, and this is the same for all of you actually, I used to be a consultant, so I kind of know what business partners consultants do, and I know that you've all got copies of data. You've all got copies of your customers' data. Restore them on your system and run out the reports, because it's actually a good sales technique. Run out the reports on your system using their data and email them to them. Sure, they'll get to see all of that really nice information, but they're only going to get to see it once. Okay, so for the customers that you're not sure about the financials, make sure you get a copy of that database and run the financials and see what effect it's going to have. Check your times, how long it's going to do, what sort of customizations you can do. So if there are problems as far as the 2003 financial report that I showed you, then we can start looking at the Financial Designer, which works a little bit differently. All right. Team. I'm not going to say guys anymore. Oh, Frederick, I did pass through your information. I see your comment that you'd like to become a trainer and guru for the product. So, yes, Frederick, I did pass that information on. Somebody from Sage should have actually contacted you, but I'll hit them up again and let them know that you're very keen and eager. Excuse me, I'm just going to silence myself for a second. Professional for you to hear me cough. Yes, Mary, it is completely different to the container. Yeah, the designer is the second financial report that you see in the financials folder. All right, Frederick, I've already got a lead for you. Somebody's going to get in touch with you. I'll send through the information, so you should get contacted very shortly. All right, team, non-generic team, thank you very much for your time again. I appreciate it. And yeah, any other questions, feel free to, team leader, thank you, Jennifer. Feel free to send through emails, questions, etc. Isaac would also like to know more about becoming a trainer. Isaac, I'll make sure that gets sent through as well. All right. So again, thank you very much for your time. Please enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays. And yeah, I'll see you guys next team. Not guys. Team next week for the next session. All right. Oh, we skip a week. I believe. Oh no, I think we've got next week. Jennifer, we've got next week. Then we skip a week because yeah, I'm going to be out of the country training. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we're still on for next week because I'm still around in the country. All right. So again, thank you very much for your time. Please enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.